The millionaire CEO shocks the beggar woman who laughed by firing everyone in 5 minutes. Richard Hale, the ruthless CEO, stood behind the glass walls of his high-rise office. Rain streaked down like the tears he'd never shed. He watched the city below, a bustling hive of dreams crushed underfoot. In just 5 minutes, he had decided the fates of dozens, crushing livelihoods with the tap of a button. Layoffs, his voice echoed in the chilly silence of his office. Below, the reactions were visceral. Whispers turned to gasps as the news spread like wildfire. Each employee a fragile frame, each gasp a reminder of uncertainty clinging to them like the damp chill of the storm outside. Amid the reactions, John, the beloved janitor with kind eyes and a gentle smile, stood frozen. He had a heart of gold, volunteering at a charity for underprivileged kids, always bringing joy. The morning sun glinted off his work cart like a beacon of hope. And now, it felt like it was snuffed out. Before he could take a deep breath, Richard's mind flashed back to his own haunted childhood in foster care. The feeling of abandonment crawled under his skin, raising an army of guilt in his chest. He pushed it down. This is business, he told himself, but it felt more like a war. As the rain drummed against the pavement, Richard stormed out of his building, the soft glow of his phone a stark contrast to the darkened city. He didn't notice the woman sitting against the alley wall. Clara was her name, and her laughter carried through the dreary streets like a spark in the night. People passed her by, too busy to notice the talent that lay hidden beneath her worn clothes. But Richard did. She was painting, the canvas an explosion of colors, a wishful landscape that screamed life in a city consumed by gray. "Why do you laugh?" he found himself asking, drawn in like a moth to flame. "Because laughter is the only color left for me," Clara replied, her eyes lighting up with mischief. "You're painting," he nodded toward the canvas. "What do you dream of?" She paused, and for a moment the world fell away. To be loved and to show children that art can change lives. Those words hit Richard like a thunderclap. His hardened exterior cracked just a bit. Beneath that facade, memories of a scrawny kid holding a paintbrush flooded back. Hope and creativity felt far away, yet her laughter pulled him closer. Could he find redemption through her art? The storm rumbled overhead, and he felt the weight of his decisions bearing down harder than the rain. Suddenly, a flash of fear gripped him. What if the repercussions of his choice bled through the community he'd intended to protect? Would he crush Clara's dreams just like he had? With John's? As they spoke, an unshakable bond began to form between them. Two souls navigating dark waters. Each laugh echoed, the raindrops mixing with the smell of wet asphalt. But always lurking beneath was the shadow of his corporate empire, ready to pull him back down. Just then, Clara stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening in shock. "Richard," she said, her voice trembling, "I need to tell you something important. Something about your past." Something inside Richard twisted, anticipation tightening his chest. A revelation that could shatter everything hung in the air as the storm began to calm. Would this be the moment that changed everything? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button down there to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content coming your way. And since you're here, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every incredible person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Suddenly, Clara took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on Richard, as if reading the very fabric of his soul. "Richard," she began, her voice a fragile whisper, "I need to tell you something important. Something about your past." The air thickened, tension mounting like a coiled spring ready to snap. "What is it?" He leaned closer, his heart racing, an icy tremor coursing through him. The world around them faded. Rain, city noise, even his looming corporate empire. Just the two of them existed in this moment. "I knew your mother," she said, her eyes wide with urgency. "She was an artist, just like me. She dreamed of changing lives with her work, but things, they got messy." Richard's mind reeled. Memories of a mother he never truly knew flickered behind his eyes. Scraps of love and pain, a shattered family. "What do you mean?" he pressed, his voice strained, feeling by the weight of the truth he might not be ready to hear. Clara hesitated, the light in her eyes dimming. "She had a dark side, Richard. She struggled with demons. But she loved you so much. I was one of the last people to see her before." Her voice cracked, the silence stretching painfully between them like raw wires. Before he could respond, a deafening crash echoed through the alley. Richard turned, his heart leaping into his throat. Against the backdrop of the dim, shadowy street, a massive figure loomed. A group of men, faces twisted with rage, marched toward them. Their shouts pierced a tense atmosphere. "There he is! Get him!" Richard's instincts kicked in. Fear surged through him as he pulled Clara closer. "Run!" he yelled, but she stood frozen, eyes glued to the approaching danger. "Why do they want you?" she gasped, but he didn't have time to answer. The thugs were upon them, raw chaos erupting like fireworks in the night. "You're a coward, Richard," one of them spat, his breath hot with anger. "You think you're untouchable, firing people without a care? We're here to make you pay." "It was just business," Richard shouted back, grounding himself among the increasing confusion. But beneath his bravado, dread coiled tightly in his stomach. These men weren't just angry employees. They were a part of everything he had trampled. In his ascent up the corporate ladder, Clara's expression shifted, realization dawning, like a sunrise breaking through the darkest night. "You're not who I thought you were," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No, it's not like that." Richard clenched his fists, desperate. "I'm trying to change. Please help me." But with each pleading word, the rage of his past bore down harder. Then, time warped. Suddenly, a blinding flash. It felt like lightning. The sound of thunder ricocheted off the alley walls as a loud gunshot rang out. Everything stopped. Clara gasped. Richard's breath caught in his throat, a lump forming, just as he turned to see her collapsing. The vibrant colors of her paint splattering against the dreary concrete. Blood mingling with the paint, red mixing with hues of joy and dreams. "Clara!" he yelled, the world around him blurring. Panic flooded his veins. He knelt beside her, cradling her head in his arms, feeling her warmth fade against the cold, unforgiving ground. "No, please," he pleaded. But his words echoed in the alley like mournful ghosts. And as he looked down at her, a part of him unraveled. The truth Clara had clung to slipped through his fingers like sand. The revelation of their intertwined fates hung in the air, thick, suffocating. Had he just lost the one connection that could redeem him? A chilling silence enveloped them, the echo of despair drowning out everything else. The thugs, caught off guard, stood motionless, their earlier ferocity replaced by shock. In that moment, Richard felt something change deep within him, like a fuse igniting. Could this chaotic night finally unravel the threads of his dark choices? His mind raced. What would he do next? Would he continue the path of a ruthless CEO? Or step into the light Clara had dreamt of, a life where art and compassion could heal? But deep down, beneath the layers of shock and pain, a fear whispered. What if this was just the beginning? Richard's heart pounded like a drum as he knelt beside Clara, her warmth slipping away under his hands. Her laughter, once a brief escape from the darkness, was now replaced with an eerie silence. The world felt surreal, the street fading into a dim blur, except for the brilliant colors of her pate blending with her blood, an unforgiving reminder of his choices. "Stay with me, Clara," he begged, desperation clawing at his throat. But she lay still, her breaths shallow, a flicker of light fading in her eyes. The thugs lingered, stunned by the sudden violence, their anger now mixed with confusion. Then, without warning, everything shifted. A loud crack echoed through the alley, not from a gun, from above. Richard looked up just as the rain-soaked sky exploded. A massive piece of metal fell from an overhead construction site, crashing to the ground mere feet away, sending a shockwave of debris flying in all directions. Time froze. Richard instinctively shielded Clara with his body. The impact sent a nearby dumpster tumbling, then a shower of glass rained down like a storm. Chaos erupted as people screamed and ran. His own fear felt like a living thing clawing at him. But in that freeze-frame moment, something incredible happened. Just above the din, a voice broke through, resonating with a familiar tone that sent shivers down his spine. "Richard, it's time to choose. Stop running." Richard's gaze snapped over to the men who had come to confront him, and amidst the confusion, he saw one figure standing out from the rest. A woman. Short hair, eyes filled with fire, her lips curling into a knowing smirk. "Who the hell are you?" he shouted, but deep down, he felt a sickening recognition. She stepped forward, dodging debris as if she was dancing. "Surprised to see me, brother?" His breath caught. Brother? The word clawed its way up from the depths of shock. "Yes, you thought you were the last of your family?" She laughed, a twisted sound in the chaos. "Mom left you, Richard. Left us both. I'm the sister you never knew existed. All those stories about our mother. The lies. Didn't you ever wonder why you were alone?" The weight of her words crashed down on him, heavier than the wreckage around them. Sister? All these years, he'd been walking through the shadows of his childhood, haunted by a presence he had no idea existed. Clara, lying still at his feet, her life slipping away, a thread connecting him to the only person who understood his pain. But now this sister, this stranger, stood there, entwining fate in a way he never could have foreseen. Frantic, Richard's thoughts raced. Why didn't you find me? Why now? But she just grinned, an unsettling look in her eyes. You followed her path, but you've only scratched the surface of what we come from. And what will come next? Well, that's up to you, big brother. With that, the thugs snapped back to their mission, their collective shock wearing off as they focused on the new threat. "Get her," one barked. The fight was back on, animosity brewing like a storm. Richard's mind spun. His heart broke for Clara, and here was another layer of his pain. Choices stretched before him, a kaleidoscope of possibilities. Could he save Clara and learn the truth about his family in the midst of chaos? Or did he weave deeper into the web of his past, forever losing what he loved? Sirens wailed in the distance, the clang of chaos swelling. Richard stood, breaths quickening, Clara slipping from his grasp. Had he lost her forever? And what would he do next? He felt the ground shift beneath him, all at the precipice of something monumental. Would betrayal be the path to redemption? The question lingered in the air, thick with tension, waiting for an answer that could change everything. Richard's heart pounded like a war drum as he stood shielded over Clara. The chaos swirled around them, sounds of shouting and pounding footsteps filling his ears. He could barely focus on the figure of his sister, her voice haunting his thoughts. You followed her path. Why did you come now? Richard shouted, barely able to contain the surge of emotions. Fear gripped him, and adrenaline twisted in his gut. But his sister, a vision of fire and fury, simply grinned as if the chaos was nothing but a mere distraction. The thugs were rapidly regrouping, their intent clear. He was the target, and they wanted him to pay. It wasn't just business anymore, it was personal. Get her, one of the men yelled, pointing straight at Richard's sister. No, he shouted, panic bubbling up. Wait, let's talk. But the words felt useless in the storm of violence approaching them. Everything blurred as he pulled Clara closer, her stillness weighing heavier by the second. Sirens wailed close by, and in that moment, something broke. The sky flashed, not from the chaos of the alley, but a blinding flash from above, a burst of brilliant light that cut through the rain. At first, Richard thought it was a trick of his mind, a spark of hope in a doomed moment. But then it grew brighter, like a flare heading straight for them. His instincts screamed, pushing him to act. Get down, he roared, as he threw himself over Clara. The thugs scattered, panic replacing aggression. But then the light landed. An explosion rocked the alley, the force knocking Richard to the ground, breath robbed from his lungs. Pain shot through his body like a lightning strike. Dust and debris filled the air. Darkness swallowing everything. When Richard finally blinked through the haze, he braced himself for the worst. But that's when he saw it. A figure rising from the ruins, lit by the dim light filtering through the dust. Richard! The voice was familiar, laced with an otherworldly echo that swallowed the chaotic noise around him. He squinted, heart racing. Mom? But no, it couldn't be. This was someone wrapped in shadows, their presence heavy with a promise of dread. I told you I'd come back for you, the figure rasped, emerging fully into view. It wasn't his mother. It was someone he had never expected. Who are you? Richard's voice cracked like brittle glass. The silhouette stepped closer, revealing features that tugged at memories, droplets of familiarity mixing with terror. It's me, Richard, the woman said, an unholy smile framing her lips. Your real mother. His mind reeled as the fragments of truth broke apart like shattered glass. What? The world spun. How could this be? I was never lost, she continued, her voice slicing through the air, heavy with the scent of rain and metal. I chose to leave you, choose the power and art I sought. I'm the very shadow of what you've become. As the rain poured down, mingling with the debris, Richard felt his heart drop. You're the reason I'm alone. A rush of betrayal consumed him, more painful than anything he had experienced before. Not alone, Richard. You've always been part of a greater plan, she cooed sweetly. The world is a canvas, and you are meant to be my brush. Shockwaves pulsed through him as disbelief turned to rage. Just then, the thugs, no longer unsure, turned their anger back toward him, emboldened. Richard's sister grabbed him by the arm. "Run, Richard! They're not done with you yet!" But he couldn't move. The words of his real mother echoed in his head. Betrayal twisted all his thoughts. "I wanted you to find your way without me. I didn't need to bind you." Her voice carried an unsettling blend of urgency and control. And in that moment of suspended chaos, Richard felt it. A pang of recognition, a longing for acceptance. He didn't know who to trust anymore. As the sirens blared louder, the alley remained a battleground of emotions. What truth remained to uncover? What iron grip of fate awaited him? Questions sprang from every angle, dark shadows twisting in the alley's corners. Richard's hands trembled as he faced his mother and the looming crowd of anger. Would he fall under the weight of their expectations? Or could he craft his own story amidst the growing storm? With adrenaline coursing through him, he took a deep breath, resolved to push back where the darkness had always pushed him down. A new choice beckoned, but would it lead him to clarity or further entangle him in the shadows? Richard's heart raced as he held Clara in a fragile embrace. Pain gripped his chest, but he couldn't focus on anything except the woman lying against the cold asphalt. Sirens wailed in the distance, a grim reminder of how quickly everything had spiraled into chaos. Richard, his sister's voice, broke through his fog of despair. He turned to see her standing tall, defiant, where the debris had settled. "You need to choose right now. You can't stay trapped in this pattern." "What are you talking about?" he shot back, his mind reeling. His thoughts were tangled, darting wildly, like the rain dripping around them. For every moment of clarity, another wave of uncertainty crashed over him. But before she could respond, a sudden commotion erupted behind them. A tall figure emerged from the shadows of the alley. Richard squinted, recognizing the outline even as confusion washed over him. It was his old business partner, Miles, a man he'd cut ties with long ago. "Miles," Richard whispered, the name feeling heavy on his tongue. "What are you doing here?" "This isn't how it ends." Miles's voice dripped with menace as he stepped closer, his presence casting a long shadow. "You disgust me, Richard. You forgot where you came from. You turned your back on all of this." "It's not what you think," Richard shouted, the tension rising. Fear rippled through him. He could sense the urgency of the moment. Everything was collapsing around them. But then, without warning, a sharp crack interrupted the growing chaos. Richard flinched as a gunshot rang out, echoing off the walls like a thunderclap that froze the world. His heart dropped as he spun around, seeing the chaos it unleashed. The thugs were firing wildly, and confusion erupted into screams. "No!" Richard shouted, reaching out instinctively. But it was too late. The bullet had struck his sister, the force of it knocking her to the ground like a rag doll. "No!" He lunged, the world blurring around him as he fell to his knees beside her. "Not again, please!" But the life in her eyes had begun to fade, and the realization crashed over him like a wave of ice. "Miles, why?" He felt his throat tighten as rage mixed with despair. The figure who had once shared dreams of success now stood as the harbinger of destruction. But then, in a moment that shifted everything, the identity of the shooter became clear. Richard spun around, realizing it wasn't just Miles leading the charge. Among the mob was a woman, the one keeping them in line. It was Clara's estranged sister, Maeve, someone Richard had never thought to confront. "Surprised to see me?" Maeve sneered, stepping into the light, her face twisted in triumph. "You think you're the only one who can dictate the lives of others? You've destroyed enough lives." "Richard!" Now it's your turn to feel the pain. Time slowed as Richard's thoughts scrambled. Clara had lost the choices he had made, and the lives caught in the crossfire of his ambition. Everything returned to him like a tidal wave. No, he growled, feeling something shift within him. No more. A spark ignited in his chest, not just of anger, but of determination. He would not let this be the end. As the reality of the moment sank in, the floodgates opened. With an unexpected surge of clarity, Richard understood that he had to reclaim his legacy. Not just for himself, but for the family he nearly lost. His choices had led him here, but he had the power to choose again. But could he fight against those shadows he once let define him? And, as he prepared to stand against darkness, the sirens drew closer, a beacon of hope amidst despair. But would it be too late for Clara? Would it change everything? Or was he destined to watch tragedy unfold again? The unanswered questions hung thick in the air. A second chance dancing just out of reach as his life spiraled toward an uncertain horizon. Richard felt the weight of Clara's body in his arms. Her warmth was fading, and panic clawed at his throat. He could barely focus on the chaos unfolding around him. Sirens were howling closer, a promise of rescue that felt miles away. "Stay with me, Clara." His voice trembled, eyes wide with desperation. But she lay still, her breaths growing shallow and quiet. The world around him was a blur. Miles. Richard's thoughts turned to the old partner, who stood looming, eyes cold. He felt anger building, and in that moment of raw emotion, he turned back to his sister, pleading again. What was it all for? Why now? His sister stepped forward, the fury in her eyes mingling with confusion. "We can't lose her." Panic seeped into her voice. "Fight, Richard! Fight for her!" But then everything changed. A figure pushed through the smoke and chaos. Another familiar face he thought he'd never see again. Richard. His blood turned cold as he recognized her. Madeline, the woman whose betrayal had haunted him for years. The woman who had twisted and turned their lives into catastrophic messes. She stood there, different from before, her demeanor calm amid the storm. "You didn't think I'd let this go, did you? You took everything from me. Now it's time for payback." "Payback?" Richard echoing, horror washing over him, anger mixed with disbelief. Was this really happening? "What's wrong with you?" "I'll tell you what's wrong." Her voice rose, a twisted grin spreading across her face. "You think you've built all this? All crooked boards and failed dreams? You've hurt so many without a thought. But now, those dreams are coming crashing down. You just didn't realize your whole life has been owed to me." Confusion racked Richard's heart. The betrayal twisted deeper. Meanwhile, the thugs shifted closer, their eyes all on him. The sirens were getting louder now, but it felt like time had stopped. Then, in the trembling silence, Madeline reached into her pocket. Richard's heart thundered. Was she armed? It ran cold in his veins. "Mom, she wasn't who you thought she was. She was part of my plan. You saved my life when you should have let me drown. But now, you'll pay the price for it." She pulled out a small object, glinting in the faint light. "No!" he shouted, instinctively moving to shield himself and Clara. Realization striking hard. Madeline threw the object towards the ground. A smoke bomb exploded, filling the alley with darkness. The world went black. "Clara! Clara!" he shouted, scrambling through the swirling shadows, desperately trying to find her amidst the chaos. But then, A loud crash echoed, a fierce sound that pierced through the murky air. Everything turned chaotic as the world blurred. We felt hands gripping him, pulling him away, voices muffled like they were underwater. "Let me go! I can't leave her!" The fear struck sharp like a knife. With the darkness enveloping him, Richard heard whispers. Secrets slipping through like wind. "Richard!" A new voice, urgent. But then someone pushed through the crowd, unexpectedly. It was Clara, standing there, vibrant and alive, yet flanked by the shadows of the past. She grinned, both radiant and terrifying. "Did you really think I was gone?" She laughed, a sound that echoed in the gloom. "Welcome to the new world you helped create." Richard's breath hitched. Everything he thought he knew shattered. "Clara, what are you doing?" "You missed the point," she gleefully continued. "This was never about you saving me. This is about revealing the truth, the family secret, all entwined. You and I, we had the power all along." Richard's heart sank. It was a twist he never saw coming. Nothing was what it seemed. He had trusted the very last connection he desperately sought. Is this real? A haze of confusion blurred his vision. As the smoke began to clear, he faced a reality far uglier than he'd ever imagined. What new truth would this new game reveal? The world shifted again, the alley stretching and constricting with every beat of his heart, and he finally sensed it. A shadow waiting to be uncovered. Richard stood there, confusion washing over him. Clara, vibrant and alive, loomed before him. He felt his heart racing. The truth hung in the air like a thick fog, heavy and stifling. "Clara? What is happening?" "You just don't get it," she laughed, her eyes glinting with a strange mix of joy and malice. "All that pain you've carried, all those choices you thought defined you, you're just scratching the surface." Before Richard could process her words, the world suddenly blurred. Again, a loud crash echoed from the alley, shaking the ground beneath him. Dust swirled, filling his lungs with grit. Richard coughed, instinctively pulling Clara to him, shielding her from whatever chaos was brewing. Then, as the smoke cleared, something clicked inside him. A realization stirred, an understanding that teetered on the edge of danger. Clara wasn't the same. Something had shifted within her, something dark and powerful. "What do you mean I'm just scratching the surface?" he asked, trying to make sense of it all. But just as he spoke, a brightness flickered at the edge of the alley. His sister, her bloodied shirt clinging to her frame, struggled to rise against the rubble. "Richard, you have to stop this. She's playing with you. Can't you see?" But Clara dismissed her with a flick of her wrist, laughter ringing out like chimes. "She's nothing but a shadow of your past. You can't let her sway you." Suddenly, Richard's heart skipped a beat when a figure stepped into the alley, shrouded in the haze, but somehow familiar. "Mom?" he gasped, feeling an icy grip of disbelief clutch at him. The woman leaned forward, her dark hair framing a face both haunting and achingly beautiful. "Yeah, it's me, kiddo," she said softly, but her eyes flashed with something sinister. "You've done well for yourself, but it's time you learned the truth." Richard's thoughts jumbled, the air thick with confusion. "What truth? What are you talking about?" "What you never knew," she said, her voice now gaining an edge. "You're more than you've ever thought. You hold the true power. The blood of our lineage flows fiercely in you." Richard felt the air chill. "What do you mean, our lineage?" But before she could elaborate, a figure from the shadows emerged. A man, tall and commanding, with an unsettling grin that made Richard's skin crawl. "I've waited a long time for this reunion," he drawled, eyes glimmering with malice. "Richard, meet your real father, The one who has been watching you all along. Everything inside Richard froze. The ground beneath him felt like it gave way. His breath hitched. What? No, this can't be. The man stepped forward, an aura of intimidation wrapping around him. You were too naive, Richard. All those choices were leading back to me, to us. The shock hit like a train. Richard staggered back, Clara's laughter suddenly turning a shade darker. You see, Richard, all the pieces are coming together. Your past, your present, even your future. His sister gasped, the color draining from her face. No, it can't be true. Richard's mind raced. Memories crashing over him like waves. The pain of abandonment, the decisions he made. All his life choices led here, to this moment of revelation. Rage surged within him, potent and fierce. Get away from me, he shouted, clenching his fists. You're lying. But the impossible truth lingered like a ghost. Everything he believed slipped through his fingers like sand. His heart pounded, caught in a whirlwind of disbelief and fear. The air crackled with tension, alive with an energy he never knew existed. Clara smirked, and Richard finally saw the darkness wrapped around her. They were tied together by blood, fate, and lies that reached through generations. And as he battled the rising storm of revelation inside him, a deafening sound cut through the air, a shattering of glass, followed by screaming. It echoed down the alley, pulling everyone's attention. What now? The shadows began to morph into something different, an ominous force slowly closing in. Richard felt the world spin again, the trail entwined with a desperate hope as he faced his own parents standing before him. Choices loomed ahead, darker than he could imagine. Would he step into the darkness or fight against the legacy they wanted him to inherit? The answer remained shrouded in uncertainty. Richard stood, heart pounding, as the reality of his family unfolded before him. His mother, standing there in the shadows, was both a stranger and familiar. But the truth that hung thick in the air weighed even heavier. Fear grabbed hold of him. What did it all mean? Clara, too, had shifted. Her laughter now had a sharp edge, a danger woven within it. "Mom, I can't," he stuttered, trying to process the raw reality clashing within him. But before he could breathe, a figure rushed out from the swirling chaos of the alley, a blur that sent shivers through Richard's spine. "Stop right there!" The voice echoed, furious and determined. Richard turned, eyes widening. It was his father, the man he never truly knew, stepping forward like a ghost from the past. The crowd around them pulsed, tinged with shock and anticipation. "Get away from him!" The vehemence in his father's voice cut through the chaos. "You don't know what you're playing with!" The moment hung heavy. Richard felt the energy shift, as if the air had become alive, crackling with tension. But then, even in that charged moment, something changed all. Around him, a loud explosion shattered the night, a deafening rupture that silenced all thoughts. The ground shook violently, tossing Richard off his feet, scattering the crowd like a burst of feathers in a hurricane. A blinding flash engulfed the alley, transforming everything into chaos. Screams erupted as stone and metal rained from above. Richard shielded his eyes, adrenaline surging as a shadow loomed nearer. When he opened them again, he struggled to focus amidst the dust and frayed cries. The alley had transformed. Pieces of the building had crumbled, creating an entirely different landscape. A war zone of debris. Clara! The name ripped from him, desperate. Pressing on from the wreckage, he squinted through the haze. But then something caught his eye. His father, standing amidst the chaos, strangely calm. "What are you waiting for?" he yelled out, voice booming. "We don't have time." Richard stumbled forward, heart racing. "What? Why? Are you not going to help?" "Help?" His father's eyes pierced with sharp intensity. "You need to let go of this. Of her. This is our chance." Before Richard could retort, the ground trembled once again. A figure emerged from the debris, half covered in dust. Clara? No. It was Maeve. She stood tall, alive, yet her smile was twisted. "All because of you, Richard," she laughed, the sound like knives. "I knew this would come. You think you can escape your past? You're just a pawn in this game." His heart dropped, the truth cutting deeper than he imagined. He felt betrayed, twisted within the web he thought he understood. The connection stretched back, and then she pointed straight at him. "You're not the hero here. No, you're the villain wearing a mask." Richard froze, adrenaline coursing through him like ice. The walls of his world began to collapse, revealing a darker truth layered beneath his actions. The girl he tried to save, did he plunge into darkness with his choices? Had every attempt to be better only pulled him deeper into the shadows? "Stop!" he shouted, desperation lacing his voice. The crowd murmured, expressions slashed with confusion and horror. They were trapped, surrounded by revelations and choices that tugged at their hearts. But it was then, as Richard looked up, he noticed the ground shift underfoot again. Before he could react, a sudden crack split the quiet. The earth splintered, and with a low rumble, a chasm opened, devouring everything near it. Time seemed to freeze as Richard felt the ground beneath him tremble and split. He would fall into the darkness, back to the truth, or something twisted. In that moment, mixed feelings of dread and reluctant acceptance washed over him. Could he leap back to the surface, learn from the shadows, or would this be the end of the search for redemption? Suddenly, Clara's face flashed like a beacon in his mind, filled with hope, laughter, and the promise of art that could heal. As the ground began to crumble, a new choice emerged, yet uncertainty lingered. Did he dare take the plunge into the unknown, or fight against the tether of what held him captive? The shock of it all pierced through him, leaving him standing on the brink of a new beginning, or the end of everything he thought he knew. Richard stood at the edge of chaos, heart racing, as the ground beneath him trembled. Clara's laughter faded into an eerie quiet, echoing in the hollowness of his mind. "Mom? Dad?" The words felt heavy with disbelief. Shadows danced around him, clawing at his sanity, and he felt the weight of family secrets pressing down. Then the ground shifted again, a violent jolt making him stumble. Everything felt unreal, like the world was wrapped in a bad dream. And suddenly, a blinding flash exploded through the disarray. It felt like time suspended. Richard shielded his eyes, squinting against the brightness. "Look out!" his sister screamed, horror drenching her voice. He turned just in time to see a massive piece of metal plummeting from the sky. Breaking through the cloud of dust and chaos, it crashed mere feet away, sending debris flying in all directions. Barely see through the dust, swirling like an angry specter. But when it settled, everything shattered even further. Clara was standing at the edge, her eyes wide, a look of realization and horror etched across her face. "Richard, you have to—" But the words fell away. Instead, she gasped, clutching her abdomen, eyes darting around. as if searching for a way out. "I can't breathe!" "Clara!" He struggled to reach her as people scrambled for safety, fear rippling through the crowd. But in that moment of chaos, another figure stepped into the light, the flames in her eyes unlike any he had seen before. "Enough!" Maeve shouted, her voice a knife slicing through the turmoil. The crowd fell silent, an icy hush replacing the cries and chaos. "You think you've got it all figured out?" She laughed, a sound like cracking glass. "It's time for the truth." Richard blinked, bewildered. And then everything broke open. "Let me tell you about your family," Maeve bellowed, her tone transforming. "You didn't think your mother was the only one, did you? You thought you were above it all? We are not just a family. We're a legacy." The world turned upside down as Maeve laughed. It wasn't the laughter of joy. It was dark, revealing, and catastrophic. Richard's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" But she didn't answer, instead turning to the crowd. "You've been manipulated!" Her voice boomed with power, rising over the gasps and murmurs. "You're all part of this game. A game where Richard is the king, and we are pawns in his beautiful tragedy." Richard's chest tightened, confusion swarming around him. "What? No! How can you say that?" But as soon as the words left his mouth, he caught a flicker of emotions breaking over Clara's face. Betrayal, fear, and then something else, something darker that linked them all together. Suddenly, he felt the oppressive weight of their pasts, a reality he needed to face. And then, just as the confusion reached its peak, a loud crack split the air, a gunshot ringing out, echoing against the walls of his reality. Everything froze momentarily as a piercing scream tore through the quietness. Richard turned to see his sister crumpling to the ground, hands clutching a bloodied side. "No!" Richard shouted. But his scream was swallowed by the cacophony that followed. Clara fell to her knees, eyes wide in shock, disbelieving as the world crumbled around them. "Get away from her!" Richard yelled, emotion boiling over. But in the chaotic devastation, even Maeve knelt, eyes wide, her strength suddenly gone. "I didn't mean for this." The helplessness rang in her voice, a fracture of humanity shining through. Richard's heart pounded like a drum, and in that moment, the truth hit him harder than any bullet. Each connection, each family member, wrapped in emotional trauma, was forged in darkness. What if they were all puppets dancing on strings pulled by forces he could hardly grasp? The implications loomed like shadows on his soul. Looking down at Clara, then back at his sister, who lay trembling, blood seeping through her fingers, Richard felt everything shift again. What was real? Who was he amidst all this madness? And as the sirens wailed on, the horizon darkened. The questions loomed heavier than ever. Would he lose it all? Or would this revelation crack the very foundation of who he thought he was? Everything he believed shattered like glass. All that remained was a desperate need to find out the truth before everything disappeared for good. Richard's breath caught as he knelt beside Clara, the sound of chaos fading into a heavy silence. The blood stained the ground in stark contrast to the colors she used to paint joy, her vibrant spirit now replaced with vulnerability. His sister lay still, regret washing over him like a tidal wave. The world turned dark, and panic clawed at his insides. "Wake up!" he shouted, gripping her hand. But there was no response, just that eerie stillness intensifying the pain in his chest. Fear coiled tighter. Then, a flash of motion caught his eye. Maeve stood taller, a haunting smile on her face, as if she had orchestrated the whole catastrophe. "This is your legacy," she sneered, glancing at the commotion of people gathered around. "You're trapped, Richard. All the choices you made led you here." "No!" he cried, the word ripping from his throat, a desperate plea to defy her chilling grasp over him. He struggled to stand, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Clara, fight," he begged, willing her to respond, to breathe, as the darkness threatened to swallow everything. But she remained motionless, the light in her eyes dimming. "Richard!" He heard his father's voice, commanding, pulling him back. "It's not over. You have the power to change this." "Change what? This is all my fault," Richard shouted, grappling with the weight of loss. How had it come to this? An explosion of noise erupted around them, shouts mingling with sirens drawing closer. The weight of what was happening crashed down. Richard's hand shook, grasping Clara tighter. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about family. Bonds that stretched beyond the grave. As the world spun into chaos, something clicked. "You're right," he gasped, eyes narrowing at Maeve. "But I won't be your pawn." With newfound resolve, he turned to the crowd. "Help me," he shouted, voice carrying across the wreckage. "We can change this." Gasps rippled through the onlookers, confusion etched on their faces. But as the sirens blared closer, Richard could scarcely breathe. Would they hear his plea? Would they rise against the burdens of the past that shackled them? And then he felt it, a warmth against his palm. Clara's fingers twitched. Hope sparked within him like a flame igniting the dark. "Clara," he whispered, clinging to her as if she were the very lifeline in a stormy sea. "Don't leave me, please." The words came out broken, his heart shattering around him as he sought answers in her expression fading before him. But Maeve stepped forward again, fury building. "You think this is over? It's just the beginning." Richard felt the air shift. "You think you control this?" he challenged, facing her with every ounce of strength he could muster. "No one is going to be silenced any longer. It's time for the truth to rise, even if it means tearing apart what we built." In that moment, Clara gasped, drawing breath, her eyes fluttered open. "Richard?" Tears filled his eyes. "You're back." The chaos dimmed as hope surged anew. "Together," Richard spoke softly, hand enveloping hers. "Let's end this." But Maeve only smirked, stepping back, the darkness still coiling around her. "You'll regret this, Richard." As the sirens drew nearer, the crowd began to awaken from its daze, rallying around him, a collective breath of realization igniting the air. The once fragile branch of hope had transformed, ready to fight against the storm. With Clara beside him, an unyielding force bloomed. The past would no longer decide their fate. Together, they stepped forward. And at that moment, the world felt different, the weight of fear lifting as they faced the unknown. Now, let's shift gears, friends. If you felt the intensity and urgency of this story, you must subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for the channel. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, and let's get these stories out there. Your reactions matter, so flood the comments section with your thoughts, theories, and feelings about this wild ending. Don't wait one more second. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to know about this mind-blowing conclusion. And whatever you do, don't leave the channel yet. Keep watching. Click on the next exciting story waiting for you at the end of this video. You won't want to miss it.